All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to my random live streams on Wednesday night. We got a few people in the chat. If somebody could just give me an indication that you can hear me, that'd be great, just in case I have technical difficulties. I'm actually trying to stream on multiple platforms right now, which isn't seeming to work out very well for me. They've already shut down the one from X because I don't have a fully funded account, and the one from Facebook also has problems with it, and Rumble just won't connect. So I don't know what's going on, whether or not you can hear me. Oh, Tony says you can hear me loud and clear. Great. At the very least, on good old YouTube, you can still hear me. Great. That's great. Let's see who we got in the chat. Jewel is here and Tony is here so far. And we got about 9 or 10 people in here so far, but I'm sure we'll come up to our normal numbers before the end of the live stream. So tonight, I actually had an actual topic, more than just a random live stream, but I wanted to talk about something that I did talk about in my last Saturday video. Let's see. I want to... There we go. Let's put this up. I want to put up some Captain America covers here in the background. Let's see if I want to let's see if I can make this larger. I don't know why in the world it doesn't give me the option. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's apparently live, or StreamYard is a different kind of live stream option, and is allowing you to show both vertical and horizontal viewings of your live stream. So I don't know why. I am assuming it has something to do with that, and for some reason I don't particularly seem to like this. And let's see if I can, there we go, turn that off. And let's see, I want to, no, still not working. Anyway, so we have some Captain America in the background here, and I'm going to talk about Captain America for a little bit, just because, well, we had Memorial Day, and there's a couple other things going around that I just wanted to talk about because of that, and hopefully I'll get to see some better views of these covers than this. Actually, I don't want the Jack Kirby's ones up. I want to go to the end of Jack Kirby. Here we go. This is where John Byrne takes over. I think it's 224. No, it's 223 that John Byrne, I think, takes over. We got some beautiful covers here from Gil Kane in between Jack Kirby and John Byrne. But anyways, we'll leave it on John Byrne. Let's see, 222, 223. There we go. We'll leave it at that. Anyways, where am I now? I have to go back to the main screen. Anyways, for anybody who hasn't been here for my live streams for a while, you can ask me anything you want in the comments, and I will try to answer all questions before the end of the live stream. Anything about my comic campaigns, anything about my normal Saturday videos, anything about what we're talking about tonight, or just any question you want randomly to ask me. So the reason I wanted to talk about Captain America was because of the fact that, as I was talking about on my Saturday video, there was that interview with yet another World War II veteran this last Veterans Day, because it was BBC, and he was basically saying that he doesn't recognize the country that he lives in, and the sacrifice that him and his friends made with all those graves, crosses, row on row, was just not worth the country that they have today, and that he believes that they have literally less freedom, and I think he's correct, in the UK than when he was fighting for it in the 1940s. Anyways, so that got me thinking about Captain America, because a lot of people are pointing out, first of all, this is not the only guy who said that. This is like, at the very least, ones that have gone viral on the internet. This is like number 5 of people like that from World War II, basically saying that this sacrifice of World War II was just not worth the degradation that we have of our society, government, and culture since World War II. It's just not worth it. So I started to think about Captain America and the fact that you have these weirdos on the left who say, yes, if Captain America were around today and was real, or if these World War II veterans were around today or if we got transported backwards to World War II, we on the progressive left, we would be the ones fighting with the Allies. And that's just not true. That's just absolutely not true. If you listen to the people who have fought in World War II and have come around and started doing interviews and things like that, they basically say, no, absolutely not. If this was the future, and I knew that this was going to be the future of the country with your quote unquote progressive people taking over control of government and institutions and everything else, it's not worth it. I wouldn't have fought. And the thing was, again, you always have these people, especially in the comic sphere. They pull out Captain America and say, "Oh, Captain America was one of us. Captain America, punched Nazis on as a regular thing, and that was his shtick." But they fail again to consider the entire history of Captain America and the fact that, well, although it's not technically canon because Captain America wasn't part of Marvel at that time, but the second iteration of Captain America actually fought communists. So yeah, he's not very, let's say, the entire holistic history of the character. He wasn't very fond of socialists in any form. But anyway, the fact is that when I got into comics, okay, we say early 80s, Captain America, which is where we're looking at these covers here, Captain America became for a long time just a adventure comic. That's all it was. It really didn't have anything to do very much with America per se. It was just an adventure comic. But when you got to a certain time after, let's see, we'll go through here. There's a beautiful cover with Captain America getting pummeled by the Hulk. But let's go down a little bit more, passing by some of these beautiful covers to the one that I'm looking for. Because again, this is John Byrne's run, and this is Captain America being action hero, and he becomes action hero again for a little bit. But at some point in the storyline, which would be, let's see, where are we at 249, let's see, we'll go to 250. Captain America in his storyline basically deserted the concept of being Captain America. And let's see, it starts here with a bit with Nomad in it, because Nomad was a character that Captain America eventually became after he basically gave up the shield. So this is a story that has been covered in the movies and a lot of different platforms. And let's see where we can put. I love this version with Deathlock in the far-flung future. I think it was 1996 that they were going forward to with the 1993, Revolution 1993. That's what he went forward in time to 1993 to the apocalypse at that time, because they were in 1983 at the point. Anyways, let's see, scrolling down. We have more Nomad covers, and then let's see where we have. Yep, it goes into the 300s, and you have Captain America again with more John Byrne. Beautiful covers, just to let you know. But you have Nomad, and then again Adventure Comics with Captain America. Let's see if I can find the cover. I apologize for I didn't look up what number it was before that. But Captain America became disillusioned with America within the 1980s. So this is not something new for the character. You always had these people who were leftists, and I'm sure we'll say quote unquote progressive people. See, Captain America no more. And you always have these people basically trying to get rid of Captain America's connection to America and just make him general purpose adventure hero. And those general purpose adventure stories were great, I'll admit. But this is back in the 1980s. And this is when people who were writing comics, the quote unquote progressive kind of people at that time, were looking at Ronald Reagan and saying, this is awful. This is the end of our society. This is the end of our culture. So think of Donald Trump in the 1980s. And I hesitate to say this because it sounds a little bit funny, but the kind of vitriol that you see these quote unquote progressive people have for Donald Trump now is, well, it was a shadow of it, I think, at the time, but during Ronald Reagan's administrations, that's exactly what you saw as well. And, you have very influential comics playing off of this idea, like Frank Miller's Dark Knight, the original Dark Knight, where you have a dystopian future that basically you have not only Batman and Superman, but you have a lot of these characters who had just been disillusioned. And it was because you have Ronald Reagan in the background. He was the backdrop of that and causing a dystopian version of America back in the 80s. In the minds of these quote unquote progressive people. And this is part of the reason why you have Captain America deserting America, because before that, there was this tangential connection that they never really got into the specifics of, that Captain America would be connected to the president and doing the bidding of the country and things like that. But again, you have these quote unquote progressive people, and they've always been there within comics. As I said in my video probably 2 weeks ago now, it's not so bad that these people are there all the time, as you have to control them. They're very creative, I'll admit, and it's good to have differing opinions to some extent when you're dealing with creatives. But at the same time, there were a lot of things that put the clamps on these people and their political ideology, and they needed to be there. They started to loosen, I think, certainly by the early 80s, even though I would say the 80s is probably the best storytelling that you would get for companies like Marvel. But anyways, you have Captain America and his disillusionment with America. And again, you see this in, I can't remember which Captain America movie it was the second or third. It was the one where he's attacked in the elevator. Can't remember off the top of my head which one that is. Anyways, so there's this strain of thought for a long time, since the early 80s, that if Captain America were alive today, he would be on the quote unquote progressive side, that he would no longer be on the side of America, not the America that is run by Ronald Reagan, not the America that is run by Donald Trump, and basically not the America that Republicans want. That's the basic gist of it. Captain America would not be in line with a present day Republican, and that present day can be anything from the early 1980s until where we are right now in 2025. So the thing is, once again, it's this quote unquote progressive narrative that they build for themselves, saying that they are the ones who were the allies in World War II. They were the ones who were fighting against the Nazis in World War II. They were the ones who, if transported back in time, would be on the winning side. And it's just not true. I mean, again, you see these interviews with World War II veterans, and it's just not true. You have these people who have fought in World War II, who have lost massive amounts of friends and companions on the battlefield, and they're saying, no, absolutely not. This country that we see around us, whether you're in Great Britain or America or a lot of other places that, English speaking parts of the world, they look at their country and say, no, this country is worse off now, as this fellow said on the BBC just a few weeks ago that I saw his interview. This country that we have right now is not worth what we paid for it, and is actually in worse straits than when we were fighting in World War II. Politically, you have less liberty. And again, this is the false narrative that has been pushed, not just now. This is not just the last 10 years within, let's say, Marvel Comics and their depiction of Captain America. Well, of course, the whole recreation of Captain America and making him a secret Hydra slash Nazi for the entire time of his existence, which was, when was that storyline? Like 10 years ago. And then they re-upped the entire thing by creating a new version of Captain America out of the Cosmic Cube. And this is the real version of Captain America. So the Captain America you've seen on the pages of Marvel Comics since that time is not the actual real person who is Captain America. It is basically an avatar for the concept of Captain America in this new new quote unquote progressive world. So for I don't know how many years, at least 10 years now, probably 15 since that storyline came out. I can't remember off the top of my head. Someone please tell me in the comments. But again, it's this quote unquote progressive idea, which is a false idea that Captain America would actually be okay with the state of America today, that he would be on the Democrat side, not just the Democrat side, but the quote unquote progressive side. And again, you have decades worth of stories of the people writing Captain America going in this direction. And again, going back to the interview that I saw just this last couple of weeks, it's not true. It's definitely not true. And there's also a strain of underlying, it's not just to transport us back to that time or transport someone from that time to this point. It's also the idea that if this person lived that entire time, they would quote unquote progress with the rest of us, and accept everything that a quote unquote progressive Democrat would accept today. And again, the facts on the ground do not support that kind of conclusion. And I don't know how long it's going to take before Captain America becomes public domain, but Superman is going to become public domain in the not too distant future, and so is Batman. But you have these narratives for these characters that have been shaped by progressive politics for decades now. And as I said, although it may have fed into some kind of interesting storytelling, again, abandoning any political connection might have helped the character, certainly with creation of stories, making him adventure hero, generic adventure hero. But at the same time, it's a narrative that I'm sure most of the people who are here listening to my voice would not agree with, and would not agree that anybody from, let's see, the battlefields of World War II would look at what they were doing and then have a picture of today and say, yeah, that's what I'm fighting for. Again, it's something I'm sure I probably don't need to say to most of my subscribers, but I think it's something that definitely needs to be said once again. So let's see who's here, and we'll go through the comments. And I've been rambling for the last 19 minutes, so we'll give you guys a voice here. Let's see. Jewel is the first one here. Let's see. Tony is here as well. Who else is here? Tony. I forgot to mention, anybody, it's a little bit late, but still, anybody who wants to ask me a question, if you're new, please put a question mark or tag me with it when you ask it, so that I know you're talking to me and you're not cross-talking to other people, and I will try to get to everybody's question. Let's see. That Jules says, I have 2 streams on YouTube right now. Seriously. Okay, I'm not sure how that works. See, I'm fiddling around with the. Thank you very much for telling me that, by the way. I'm just going to take a look here. I'm fiddling around with trying to stream to multiple platforms at one time, and it's not exactly working for me. So, yeah, you're right. I'm looking at my back end of YouTube, and for some reason, there are 10 people on one live stream and 24 on the other. And there's 15 comments. Let's see, 15 likes on one and 8 on the other. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work when I close down the live stream. But hey, just to let everybody know, I guess if you're seeing few people in the comments and you don't see the normal people there to talk to, you might be in a different live stream than where everybody is. I'm not sure how that has happened. Okay, Tony says, would you consider old school Superman the ultimate patriotic superhero above Captain America? Old school Superman. How old school do you want to go? We talking World War II Superman? Not entirely sure about that. You'd have to be a little more specific about old school Superman. Give me more a decade. That being said, Superman is, well, there was a lot of serials and things for both of these characters. So trying to track down even the decade that the character was written in, you still have to talk about the medium wherein that character was portrayed, because it could be comic books, it could be radio shows, it could be even some serial reels that they would play before movies and things like that, which you got for, I think, both characters, at the very least Superman. So again, that's a bit of a loaded question. You have to whittle it down a little more. That being said, again, if you look at the serial reels, the Captain America that was presented there was less connection to America, if I remember correctly. Superman was much more of a connection to America. And again, if you're going back to comic books, you got a whole bunch of different iterations of, let's say, Superman, because the whole publishing strategy for Superman at the time was no two stories are connected, whereas Captain America was much more, even when it wasn't a character that was controlled by Marvel, because it didn't exist at that time. I think a character with a contiguous storyline. So again, 6 of one, half dozen of another. I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. Let's see. Joel says, this is a stream that RJ talks about race. Well, let's see. Manny is here. How you doing, Manny? Says, quick question. Why are there 2 live streams going on at the same time? I am not entirely sure. I have no idea. Like, I have Amish levels of, technological literacy. So what happened there, I don't know. I tried to stream on multiple platforms at once with my Facebook, which I don't even remember when I set that thing up, and with my X account. And I just am streaming on 2 platforms on YouTube. I have no idea what I did. So unfortunately, some people might be sequestered in a live stream that has less people talking in it. I can see everybody's comments, so that at the very least is good. Let's see. Okay, Manny, Jewel has figured it out. He says the other is for phones or something, vertical video. Yes, that's what it is. Thank you very much, Jewel. Let's see. The thing is that StreamYard has given me an option to stream in 2 different aspect ratios, and apparently that means there's 2 different streams going on. So one is for phones and one is for YouTube. Thank you very much, Jewel. I am going to, I don't think I can do anything about that tonight, but I will make sure that I don't pick the double aspect ratio thing that StreamYard has shoved at me for the last week next time. Let's see. Wilhelminus, I have no idea what you're talking about. You'll have to be more specific about your question about Curtis Yarvin. Name doesn't ring a bell off the top of my head. Let's see. Tony says, always gets on my nerves how the left equates Nazis with right-wing conservatives when in reality Nazis stand for National Socialists. Yes, here's one of the things about some of the videos on my channel. Until I did that World War II video about 3-4 months ago, saying the World War II narrative is beginning to crack. That I think I almost reached 150,000 views on that, which is probably the most popular video on my channel. But there's one video that constantly just ticks the left off, and it was my covering of the Superman Smashes the Klan. That was the one I did a video on that, and I talked about how this entire thing was ridiculous because that's exactly what they're doing. It's Gene Yang, who is a ridiculous, we'll just say Democratic shill at the very least. And, he can write some good stories, but when his politics get involved, no. So when I did my review of that, my basic gist of my argument was they're equating Klan members with modern day conservatives when Klan members were actually Republicans, or sorry, were actually Democrats in their original format. And if they're around today, they still are. And you see the basic mindset of these people, even today, is yes, let's let in all of these, let's say, unfortunate people of different skin color into America because they can't take care of themselves, bigotry of low expectations, and well, they want to pick our cotton and our vegetables and our fruits. So we'll have to use them as a slave labor class. So yeah, that's honestly, that's what I see when I look at your normal everyday, we'll say, Democratic politician, and they're pushing for mass immigration. Anyways, so yeah, my gist in that video was the fact that you're tying the Klan to Republicans and conservatives is a absurd notion. But every once in a while, it used to be like once a month, even though that video is years old now, I would still get people coming into the comments, these quote unquote progressive people, saying, so apparently you're siding with the Klan, are you? It's like, you people you don't have any critical thinking skills at all, do you? But I leave it up. I make sure that I'm never going to take that video down for the rest of my channel, just because it ticks them off so much. Anyways, scrolling down. See what else we got here. Scrolling down. Tony also says, in my opinion, there's never been a decent Captain America run written by a boomer writer. Okay. Decent Captain America run written by a boomer. Well, I don't know. The stuff done, well, again, the stuff done by Jack Kirby, again, I don't own, I'm not John from John's Longbox. By the way, we just did a 2-hour live stream last night. If anybody wants to see more live streams from me, I'd go over to John's channel, John's Longbox, and we just did a 2-hour live stream yesterday. When the next time we'll get to do one, I don't know, because he's on the night shift. But I don't have the backlog of every comic in existence that John does to go back and read all of the Jack Kirby stuff. So if I knew more about the Jack Kirby run, I could say yes or no, but from what I know about it, I would disagree. There might be some decent Captain America written stories in Jack Kirby, and the people working with Jack Kirby would be boomers at the time. But again, I could be wrong on that. Don't take that as gospel. Let's see. George says, this is why G.I. Joe is not where it should be. When they dropped Real American Hero and replaced it with International Hero, a lot of people quit. I didn't even know they replaced it. Seriously? That's the catchline of G.I. Joe. It's G.I. Joe, for crying out loud. Are you serious? I did not even know this existed, George. Thank you very much for bringing this to my attention. But the whole idea is you call Americans Joe. That was the whole point. It's a World War II reference. You call Americans Joe. I don't remember what you called, I remember because you got limeys and you got Kiwis and you got what? You have different ways of referring to different people within World War II. And some of them are according to names. Some of them are according to descriptions. But Joe was for Americans. So G.I. Joe, it's like general issue. That's America. You can't use the term G.I. Joe without it being American. That makes no sense. So yeah, their tagline was Real American Hero. How and okay, I'm about to burst right now. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Thank you for pointing it out, George. Let's see. Winter Soldier is the movie that I'm thinking of. Thank you, Michael. And Michael is here. Thank you very much, Michael. Scrolling down. Let's see. George says, well, in the 80s is where they had Dark Phoenix, Inferno, Fall of the Mutants, Mutant Massacre, etc. All stories they reprint. Yeah. And again, this is more to my point. The whole Dark Phoenix saga, which is, I've gone over this many times on my channel, so I apologize if you heard this over and over again. But the whole idea of what I've been pushing for the last couple of weeks is you take these liberal people and they might make good creatives, but you need to put some blocks on them. You need to put some restraints on them in order for them to tell good stories, in order for them not to go off the rails. And the Dark Phoenix saga is a prime example of that, because you had Chris Claremont coming to Jim Shooter saying, I want to do this story. We want to kill Jean Grey. And he's like, no, you're not going to do that. And then he said, okay, I'll explain to you why and how I'll do it. And he said, okay, that sounds like a good story. That sounds like something we will do. But you're not going to have the ending that you want. You can't allow Jean Grey just to come back and be a normal schoolgirl anymore. She just destroyed an entire planet worth of, we'll say people, because they're aliens, but they're just faux people, and not to mention an entire starship full of people. She can't just go back to being a normal schoolgirl. Reality doesn't work that way. This is the words of Jim Shooter from the mouth of Jim Shooter himself. Chris Claremont, even him, he would lament, oh, Jim Shooter messed up my story. And then I remember an interview with him and two other writers. I don't know if the other one was, it couldn't have been Anna Senti. There was might have been Wheezy that was in the interview, and she basically looked at Chris Claremont and said, no, you're telling it in a biased way. And you got to remember back to when you actually wrote this story and you were talking to Jim, and Chris Claremont relents and he says, yeah, you're right. I am telling it in a biased way. Jim did make the story better by making sure it had that ending where Dark Phoenix and Jean Grey died. So again, exactly. Great stories come from this period, but great stories also come from this period because you had people, and I wouldn't say, you have to be on the quote unquote progressive side in order to tell a good story, but you can tell a good story if you're on the progressive side and you are not allowed the full range of motion of your insanity. Let's put it that way. Tony says, RJ, any love for the 1990s Golden Globe Captain America film? No. 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 I can remember watching that on television. If that's the one I'm thinking of, it's the one with Captain America has basically like a plastic shield. The prop of the shield looks plastic, and it's not only looks plastic, but it wasn't red, white, and blue. Was red and blue, and the white parts were plastic. You could see through it. I think that's the one. But anyways, that was just awful. That was the reason why. That was one of the reasons why. We'll put it that way. Superhero movies are so bad, and when something like Batman, what was it? The Tim Burton Batman came out, it was like revolutionary that you could have an actually good superhero movie. So yeah, as let's just say, as fun as it was in a campy style, I got no love for it. And although I have to say, right now, one of the reasons why I was thinking about this and thinking about this Captain America stuff is because of the fact that, looking at where the MCU has gotten to, I don't really want to watch the MCU movies anymore. I just don't. I mean, they were great when they came out, and it was great at the time. And they are great movies for all that they're worth, but the contamination of the idea of these characters has just bled into so much wokeism that I don't even want to go watch them anymore. I don't want to rewatch them. There's so many things that I have better things to do with my time. I'm rereading Tolkien, right? That's better to my time. Or even just rewatching the Peter Jackson movies from Lord of the Rings. I'd rather do that 5 times over than watch, let's say, Captain America anymore. And that's one of the things, again, within, I think it was it was in the second Captain America movie. Again, you get this nonsensical, quote unquote, progressive agenda sticking its head up in this weirdest way, wherein basically Captain America accepts modern day America, having been brought forward the entire way and having no intervening connection whatsoever. He was just frozen in ice, and all of a sudden he's looking at present day America and he's accepting it because, oh, the food tastes better. Yeah, that's the idiotic argument that you get right now in Great Britain and other places where this progressive narrative has taken hold, and the people are enthralled by it. It's, oh, you see, we need to have all of these immigrants because, you know, British food tastes like garbage and you need a little spice in your life. So it's worth ruining our country because you might have a little bit better food. It's ridiculous, nonsensical. Well, obviously nonsensical because their entire ideology is nonsensical. Anyways, I'm going off on tangents, which is kind of the reason why I have so much to say on this topic and wanted to do a live stream. Let's see. Scrolling down. Michael says, Obama drone striked weddings without congressional approval. Captain America wouldn't support that. But again, what side is Obama on? I agree, but he would be that's Democrats, but at the same time. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Jules says half the libtards wouldn't have been on the winning or losing side because they would be back in whatever third world they came from. Well, it is a world war, so you know. Yeah. It's like the fact, okay, I'm going to tick somebody off right now when I say this, I'm sure. Probably somebody that's watching this live stream later on. But it's like the fact that I always think of like the Nietzschean philosophy, wherein he promotes this idea of constant struggle and bloodshed throughout your entire life and the will to power, and yet he couldn't even stand the sight of blood. He tried to become a soldier and he was rejected. And then he tried to become a stretcher bearer on the battlefield. And because he couldn't stand the sight of blood, he just couldn't hack it. And so you have this man who is saying strength above all else. And he's the weakest person of the entire group, which is why his philosophy is so telling to who the man is. This is the same thing that you would get with these people, right? They wouldn't have the fortitude to even consider standing on a battlefield or consider even opposing the opponents that they have to their political ideology face to face with any real consequence. Let's put it that way. We'll just leave it at there. Scrolling down. Michael also says Captain America also wouldn't support Clinton bombing hospitals in Yugoslavia, even after learning what the Serbs were doing. Again, what side is Clinton on? Scrolling, not to say that all Republicans are bathed in holy water saints by any means, but I'm saying that the basic trend towards what Captain America would have accepted over the years with progressivism is nonsensical, to say the least. Scrolling down. Scrolling down, George says, well, the current Captain America is still a clone from the Cosmic Cube. Exactly. That's why it's not the actual character anymore. It's not Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers wasn't a secret Nazi from 1945 up until 2010, 2012 when that storyline came out. So yeah, they've destroyed the entire character. So Marvel has misused its let's just say its stewardship of the character beyond belief. John is here. He says, checking this out at work. John, don't electrocute yourself, please. Not on my account. By paying more attention to me than what you're doing. Pay attention. All right. Let's see. Zach Dan is here. He says, have a blessed day, everyone. Giving his normal drive-by blessing, as John would call it. Okay. Now I can understand where I can see people in the other chat with the second live stream. Let's see. So we have Black Hat saying Captain America would not coddle emus. Emus? Yes. No. I agree. Let's see. Zach Dan says people tend to become more conservative as they age. That's a good point. Take someone from the 1940s to make them more conservative. Zach Dan, I hadn't thought about it that way. That is a good point to bring up. Let's see. Jules says tons of modern liberals went more left as time went on. Could be what happened to Captain America. Tons of lefty veterans today. Well, here's the thing. If you have tons of lefty veterans today, I'm not disputing the fact, because I can't tell you right now. I don't have access to that kind of information. But if you have them, why in the world, when these leftist propaganda machine television stations like the BBC start to interview them, just a random person that they pick, the person starts to go off on how what they see around them today is ridiculous and they wouldn't fight for it anymore. That seems to me to be an indication that there might be some veterans that are lefty out there, but I would not say there's tons of them. To my mind, that metric would probably be the only thing that I could base it off of, but I wouldn't say tons, to say the least. Let's see, scrolling down. Oh, Sound Engraver is here. See, we got the normal people in the chat again, which is great. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach Dan says, I think Captain America would sympathize with that British vet. I agree. Again, I would agree that if Captain America existed as an actual person with verisimilitude, he would agree with that British vet. But if you look at the character, which is what I'm trying to say here, going over these older 1980s Captain America storylines, if you look at the progression of the character, even since the 1980s, you could make a argument, certainly, which the left has, for the opposite. And I think it's because of a mishandling of the concepts of the character and the character itself. Let's see. Scrolling down. Wilhelminus says, RJ, what do you think? Yes, I don't know. You'd have to tell me who this person is. I don't know the name off the top of my head, Wilhelminus. You probably did, and I'm just way behind on the chat. Vaz is here. How you doing? It's a good day. RJ is back for streaming, and my comic book shop finally can order Conan books again. Well, Faz, why couldn't they order Conan books to begin with? Let me know that in the comments. I would be interested to know the reason for that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Tony says, it certainly does pop the bubble that Antifa would be best friends and very politically aligned with your average World War II doughboy. Yeah. They're basically taking the idea of the enemy of my enemy is my friend to its extreme conclusion that doesn't play out in history. Because again, it makes zero sense if you look at the entire thing historically. You have the brown shirts. Let's go back to Germany in the 1930s. You have the brown shirts fighting against Antifa. And basically, you have your two socialist strains trying to take control of Germany, one of them being communist, the other one being National Socialists. And the National Socialists won, which is why they took over Germany and why you have the 1940s playing out the way that they do with World War II. But the point is that Antifa was on the communist side, and the communist side does have an anchor in another entity and another country, which is Russia, which becomes the USSR. And after World War II, even though there was an allyship with the West and Russia and the Soviet Union at that time, as soon as World War II ended, that allyship was broken and they became the enemy. So no, doughboys would not be in allyship with Antifa in any way. They became the enemy. After this enemy, which was more pressing, was defeated of the National Socialists, then Antifa and its expression politically, which would be a country like the USSR, became the new enemy. So yeah, that makes no sense. Scrolling down. Scrolling down. Jules says Captain Marvel, Bullet Man, the Blue Beetle, and Hawkman would have been the most patriotic of the 40s. Really? Again, You could be telling me lies, Jewel, but I will trust you in saying that, and it is true because I don't know a whole lot about 1940s comics off the top of my head. Let's see. Zach Dan says, which stream is better? Depending on which one you want to be on, Zach Dan. The reason why there's two streams, as we have figured out, is one of them is for the aspect ratio of a cell phone. So next time I'm just going to do it for YouTube. And if you can't see it on your cell phone correctly, sorry about that. Let's see. Again, it's because StreamYard is trying to push something new. Let's see. Alchemic 80s. Technologically impaired is a common phenomenon among us older generation. I get there eventually. It's just a little bit slow on the uptake. That's all. Scrolling down. See, here's the thing. Can you watch the vertical one on YouTube? Does it look like a short? Is that what it is? Not entirely sure. Let's see. Tony also says, RJ, I meant the pre-crisis Infinite Earths 1938 to 1987 Superman, Truth, Justice, and the American Way Superman. Yeah, but here's the thing. Truth, Justice, and the American Way was not really a Superman trait from 1938 to 1987. I will say that in so much as there are versions of Superman, because again, literally until the end of Crises, and Jim Shooter, again, attests to this because he wrote Superman from what? The 60s onwards? I'm not entirely sure when he started writing Superman, but he attests to the fact that he wanted to do, he was doing Legion of Superheroes at the time. He wanted to do what Marvel was doing, which was contiguous stories, which was continuity stories. And they told him, no, we don't do it that way. The whole point of Superman and all of DC comics at that point was you can pick up any of these comics at any point in time and read them out of any kind of order whatsoever, and they will make sense because they're all standalone stories. It's like Superman in every last version of every comic that you picked up between those times, certainly that DC had control over the character, was an alternate Earth Superman from the one before. So again, not to say that there was no such thing as Truth, Justice, and the American Way for Superman, not at all saying that. It was a part of the character, but the character itself never followed any strict timelines or any strict connection of one story to another. So it's hard to say that this character as a whole was more patriotic than Captain America. That's basically where I'm trying to go with it. It's the, not really the medium, but the way in which the stories were told. So we'll put it that way. In my mind, again, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It all depends on who's telling the story and what iteration of Superman you get or Captain America you get. Let's see. Michael says the Democrats funded the first and second clans. Don't know about the third or the later clans. Yeah, that was kind of my point with my Superman smashes the Klan video. Let's see. George, yes, this is what the left does always. Accuse your enemy of what you yourself are doing. That's what the left has done all the time, which is why when I had to readjust my mind probably like 10 years ago saying, okay, because I always like to argue and I like argumentation. I had to readjust my thinking as whenever I heard a quote unquote progressive person speaking, I would have to check myself and say, okay, I know from his language that you're a progressive. Therefore, what are you trying to hide by saying these things? Because most likely, if it's coming to your mind, is because you are either doing it or want to do it. Let's see. Scrolling down. Manny says, RJ wasn't Superman Smashes the Klan, a radio show that they decided to adapt. Yes, it was. It was a radio show that they decided to adapt. But the whole point was the radio show, and I've listened to the radio program, by the way, before I did my Superman Smashes the Klan video and all that. I listened to the original. Again, there's no connection in that old video of the Klan is equal to the Republicans, which is what Gene Yang throws in. And oh, by the way, he also the book starts out with Superman actually fighting a Nazi, and then goes into the Klan. So it's basically connect Republicans, because everything that comes out of the mouth of these Klan members within the story is, this is something a Republican would say at that time, which was what, like 6 years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago. And so they're basically saying, oh, Republicans equal Klan members, and Klan members are an offshoot of Nazis. Therefore, Republicans are secretly Klan members and Nazis. That was the basic gist of Superman Smashes the Klan, which is complete nonsense. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see, scrolling down. Michael says, there's a video from 2015 where Bernie Sanders says that mass immigration is a Republican strategy to lower workers' wages. Yeah. I'm quite aware of that. I was just thinking, here I was thinking about, and after talking to John about this, because John lives in New York, about the whole Mandami thing, and him becoming, he's basically a socialist communist declared as such by himself, and he's now the mayor elect of New York City. I think the greatest grift in the 20th century and the now 21st century is socialism, in the fact that if you want to become rich, declare yourself a socialist, then run for political office. And yeah, certainly this is the new thing in America, right? And Bernie Sanders was probably the one who pioneered the entire thing. So run on a platform of things that you can, that sound great to people who basically are lazy, but can never actually be implemented. And they can't be implemented because, certainly in America, you have blocks against these people implementing such ridiculous policies. But you'll become a millionaire at the very least, like Bernie Sanders. And I'm sure Mandami is fairly well set up himself. But yeah, this is the greatest grift that you will, one of the greatest grifts of modern times, is become a socialist politician in America and promise things that will tug at the heartstrings of selfish people, because you can promise them the world, you never have to actually do anything about it. You never actually have to try and implement these policies, because there's so many blocks against these policies to begin with that you can't even get it off the ground. But you'll get elected, and then you can use that for your own purposes to become wealthy. Let's see. Jules says, I highly doubt the KKK would vote for the current Democrats or even the current Republicans. Both parties are too woke and minority loving. I would agree, Jewel, to some extent. That being said, you have, I can't remember that guy who was basically, what was he? I don't know. He was the guy, like the whole punch a Nazi thing. He was the first one. He basically got punched in the face, and he was, espousing these national socialist ideas. But he said he would back Joe Biden, and he voted for Joe Biden. So 6, maybe. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yeah, let me change if you can see these at all. Again, my fault for trying to work with StreamYard and put in something new for the small version of these covers that you see up behind you or behind me. But I'll put some more up. George says, I like the John Byrne and Ron Lim, Ron and Captain America. Yeah, again, generic action hero. Jerry for Germans. Yeah, that's exactly Zach Dan. You got Jerry's for Germans, which we were talking about, the various basic names for different peoples in World War II. Jules says, Zoomers don't need a government-issued Joe. They need a government-issued wife. Yeah. That's a discussion for another day. Let's see. Scrolling down. George says, I think the Germans were called Jerry's and the French were Froggies. I'm not entirely sure, again, of the whole nomenclature for the entire thing. John says, driving, but here in spirit. Okay. As long as you're not getting distracted at work, John. That's great. Let's see. Vaz says during World War II, Canadians were referred to by various nicknames such as Red Patch Devils by the Germans. Yeah, basically the Canadians in World War II were called coolies. I think it was it World War One or World War II? I can't remember which, but Canadians were seen as coolies. By the British because they would do actual work, whereas most of the British people would say, "No, I'm not doing that. That's coolie work. That's for let's just say people with not just light skin." But Canadians were used to actual work, so they would do coolie work and not complain about it. Let's see, scrolling down. Let's see. Tony says, what I meant to say was Captain America comics were better written by people that actually experienced World War II, the ones that were part of the greatest generation, Kirby, Simon, and Lee. Okay? Well, I would agree that they have a take on the character which is much more in line with the creation of the character. You're right. Absolutely right on that. Let's see. Jewel is not a Kirby fan. He says Kirby is a bad writer and a bad artist. I would say, again, it had more to do with the fact that Kirby was so quick in how he had to create his comics and his characters. I would say that I never, as a kid, liked Kirby's drawings specifically, but I have more and more appreciation for them as I get older. As to his writing, he's very much a comic book writer in the fact that he has beautiful ideas, but a lot of them are executed poorly. If there was much more editing done within the creation of his stories, they could become much better, which I think is attested to by the revamping of characters like Omak. Omak is a very interesting idea, but the stories that Jack Kirby did with Omak were not the most interesting Omak stories. But when you have the character in the hands of someone like John Byrne, which there was a miniseries of Omak in the 80s that John Byrne did, it was beautiful. I really like that. It brought up some interesting ideas as well. Let's see, scrolling down. Tony says, oh, he's talking to Joel. Let's see, scrolling down. And we'll see what else we got here. Michael says Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder are what RJ's talking about. Ragnarok is good, while Love and Thunder was bad because no one told the director no. Exactly. That's the problem. That is the problem. And it's not only the problem, but it is, I think, the tactic of the far left. Even as far back as the 80s and certainly the 90s and early 2000s. You get a lot of shows at that time where they get their legs under them and the writers and the showrunners are creating something that does sell. And when they get their hooks into an audience back then, let's say the 90s, when they got their hooks into an audience and the audience was there and they could count on them being there, then they started to interject their progressive agenda into the entire thing with, oh, let's make this side character that, and let's make this about the political ramifications of that. That's the entire thing. It's because, again, with shows that started to gain traction and become more and more popular, they would give more and more leeway to, let's say, the writer, and then the more leeway you give to the writer because he's the heart of what the show is about and making it into what it was, the worse the show became. So yeah, it's basic tactic of the left. Let's see. George says, I remember those old TV shows from the 70s, or was it the 80s, where Spider-Man walked around like a monkey? Yeah, that was also very bad. Let's see, scrolling down. New York Clerics? I'm not entirely sure. I've seen you here before, but welcome nonetheless. I collected X-Men cards in the 1990s. I bet they're all worth hundreds, and I tossed them all away. I don't know if they'd be worth a whole lot, quite honestly. That's what I thought about a lot of my stuff. I lived like a monk for like 10 years before I started this channel. Basically cut off from the entire world. And I came back and I started to go on the internet saying, I bet you my comics are worth a lot now. And then I'd look up ones that used to be worth something, and not very many of them are still worth a whole lot. Not the ones that I thought would go up in price, at the very least. I do have other ones that are fairly expensive, like, the first appearance of Deadpool, which I think I have multiple copies of. I don't know why, but yeah, when I bought it, it was like, this is a bad comic. So it would be surprising. I think for most, that's why speculation for comics never really works out. Scrolling down to see if let's see. George says the Japanese version, even though they gave him a Voltron mech to fight a kaiju at the end of the episode, but at least had him climb walls and shoot webs. Yeah, he's talking about the Japanese version of Spider-Man. Yeah. Although, to say the least, the mech for Spider-Man, when did the Japanese version of Spider-Man come out? Was it the early 80s? I'm not entirely sure, because you had mech stuff going in Spider-Man within the 70s within the comics, so it's not something completely foreign. He had his own dune buggy that could drive on walls, and the whole Shogun Warrior thing was bleeding into a lot of American comics at the time. Avengers and Godzilla are ones I could just think of off the top of my head. I'm sure Spider-Man was in there as well at some point. Scrolling down. I'm going to scroll up for 1 second. Let's see. Show this comment. Jimmy, thank you very much for this comment. Captain America is just a nice guy. Let's leave it at that. Let's see. Scrolling down. I see George is referring to a comment I made a while ago saying, brown people food doesn't even taste food. It's just a bunch of gross spices. Northern European food is the best. Jewel, I bring this up because it was kind of something I was thinking about this week as well, which I might bring into one of my Saturday videos. I think what he meant to say was brown people food doesn't even taste good. It's just a bunch of gross spices. Northern European food is best. Here's the thing. They talk about how, this puts spice into your life. You're correct. They do put spice into it, but what's the point of putting so much spices into it? The entire reason why non-Europeans in so many sections of the world put so much spice into their food is to cover up the fact that their food tastes disgusting. Or what they're eating is something that you normally shouldn't be eating, or it has gone bad, or things like that. They have no refrigeration, right? This is why they use so much spices. It's to hide the fact that what you're eating is not going to taste good. So let's put all these spices onto it so you'll stomach it because you need to eat something. So I kind of agree with you, Jewel. I would much rather have a full belly with good hearty food that is let's say we'll go back to the Captain America line from the movie, which is just boiled potatoes and cabbage. Then have something extremely spicy, which is going to make me queasy. Or if I saw how it was prepared, would make me queasy. So I kind of agree, Joel. Scrolling down. Sound Graver, thank you very much for the super chat. Says, you can't let the bad of the present punish the good of the past. I will always watch the original Star Wars, despite whatever Disney has done to it. Well, here's the thing. I'm not a Star Wars fan, and I gave up on Star Wars when the prequels came out. I didn't even go see the third one. I was so disgusted with the first two. I watched the first one. I was lamenting it, and I thought maybe they'll fix it in the second one. I watched the second one. It was just so horrible. I gave up on the third one. Now, I didn't watch it until decades later after it had come out. But it was so bad. So I gave up on Star Wars long ago. So yes, I can still watch the old Star Wars if I wanted to. It's not something I particularly would do on a regular basis, but I could watch it without being completely disgusted by where the franchise has gone because I gave up on it. But Marvel is a different story. Marvel, I watched degrade, and now I can see strains of what they were trying to do with their nonsensical progressive agenda all the way back into even Captain America, the first Avenger. So, unfortunately, that's what it is. Not saying that I'll never watch those movies again, but I'm not going to watch them in lieu of, again, doing something like watching Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. I'll do that instead. But thank you very much for the super chat, Sound of Graver. Thank you. Let's see. Zach Dan says, I'm not the biggest fan of British food, but I care about British culture. There you go. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of British food to begin with either. But I mean, think about things like soda bread. I mean, when I traveled Ireland, right? Part of this was before the turn of the century. One of the mainstays of what I would have to eat, because I would usually stay at places where they would feed you as well. I was a college student at the time. Anyways, you'd get soda bread or Irish soda bread or things like that, which, sometimes they put raisins in it, and that would be basically the only taste that it would have. But it was something that filled your belly. It's kind of like, we're going back to Lord of the Rings. It's kind of like, what do they call it? Cram. It's kind of like cram, right? Which is what it was, the human version of lambus bread, which got to a point where it almost became unrecognizable, but it filled your belly. And it was what the men of Laketown had made into their basic, at the very least, travel food, because it was light and easy to carry and it filled your belly. I would rather have a full belly than have something spicy or have something that was terribly, let's say, Epicurean in its construction. If you know what I'm talking about. So yeah. And that's, again, me being someone who grew up mostly in the country. I'd rather have a good hearty food to fill my belly, especially if I'm going to do farm work. Scrolling down. I don't know how long I have to get to the end of the comments, but I will get to the end, even though we're on an hour and 8 minutes right now. Tony says, RJ, you're thinking about the 1979 Captain America TV movie. The 1990 film is a little rough, but pretty enjoyable. No, then I have not watched the 1990 film then. I think I've seen clips of it, but yeah, I could very well be conflating the two. Let's see. Scrolling down. Zach Dan says, sometimes people admire the virtue they know they lack. Sometimes they're just not self-aware. That's a good point. Good point, Zach Dan, and also a good point to bring it back to, because we want to go back to what is the heart of the character of Captain America or Superman, certainly as an American hero. Let's go with it in light of virtue. Don't look at it in light of what this story tells or what that story tells. Look at it in light of virtue. And yes, believe it or not, defense of one's own country is a virtue. So scrolling down. Let's see. Jules says, Nietzsche got sick at the sight of blood. Lovecraft got sick at the sight of blacks and Italians. Jewel. You always have some interesting comments. Yeah. Italians would be considered non-whites at the time that Lovecraft was around, just to let you know. Scrolling down. Tony says, RJ, do you think that the reason why the recidivism rate is bad for Batman's villains in Arkham is because psychology is a crock? That would be a very wow, Tony. Look, I have people in my comments who could write better Batman stories than the people writing Batman right now. This would make a beautiful backdrop to a story, a Batman story right there. And you don't have to put any political nonsense in there at all. It's like, I'm sure that someone has written a story similar to this, Tony, considering how many Batman stories there are out there. But this would be, well, especially because the whole point of, let's say, something like the Batman movies where you have Scarecrow actually being a doctor in Arkham before he becomes a supervillain. But yeah, that would make a good story, and that would be a good way to explore that kind of question, which is something that I would put a question mark on as well. I've never thought of it that way before, Tony, but that sounds extremely plausible to me, enough to write a really good Batman story off of it. Let's see. How you doing, Plush? Good to see you here again. It says, funny that business with Sam Snap Wilson and the Cosmic Cube. Disney is sleeping on money. A proper Falcon movie with Tarantino vibes, blaxploitation. Tarantino blaxploitation vibes for the Falcon. Yeah, I can't see Disney or Marvel ever doing that. But you could be right. You could be right in the fact that it would be a blockbuster. Let's see, scrolling down. Jules says, I meant like Middle East veterans, not World War II vets. Middle East veterans? I mean veterans from like the Gulf War and things like that? Well, I could see why. They would be much more modern people if that's what you're referring to. Sound Engraver says, RJ, I'm not teaching late anymore, so I hope to catch these live streams more often. Great to hear, Sound Engraver. Scrolling down. Cleric says, was Conan woke too? No, I would not say Conan was woke. I would say Conan has a strain of psychological distress in it, which is one that is shared with people who are quote unquote progressive, but I wouldn't say it was woke. If you're going back to the original creation of the character, which, let's see, reaching over to my Conan section of my bookcase right here. With the Sprague de Camp stuff, he was much more of a, I want to make Conan into a Tolkien type world, if you ask me, from my reading of the books. But Robert E. Howard stuff, no. And the creation of the character, I would say no. Again, I think that Robert E. Howard had psychological problems, which you can, I think, obviously see from the very fact that he killed himself after his mother died. He like walked out to his car and then took a handgun out of the glove compartment of his car, and that was the end of him. A psychologically healthy individual does not do that. I mean, I'm not breaking any new ground in saying that. And I think the fact is that that Howard had problems, obviously, with his mother, because his death was tied to the death of his mother, like directly tied, moments later. And the fact is that he was trying to define what it was he wanted to be as a man, but was probably suppressed by an over-controlling mother and never could be. And again, at the very least, he was trying to explore what it was to be a man and to try to figure out where the boundaries of that was. And he did see, let's say, virtue in the idea of Conan becoming a king, and a noble king, to say the least, because you look at the latter versions of Conan, things like what is it, the Red Citadel, where he is the king. He basically gives up his life, ready to give up his life for his people. They offer him, like the surrounding kings, if I remember correctly, defeat him in battle, and they say, we don't want to kill you. We will give you treasure beyond belief. And you're just a barbarian, so just take it and walk away, and we'll take over your kingdom. And he won't. He won't. He says, no, I will not abandon my people to tyranny. So he becomes a lawful good king. So yeah, I think that was the virtue that Howard was actually going for. If somebody asks me a Conan question, I'm going to go off on a tangent for probably 15 minutes. But anyways, the point being, that he was straining to be masculine in a way that I think his mother kept him from being. And that is a strain of smothering motherhood that I think you will see in the and weak fatherhood you will see and in the background and personal history of so many of these progressive people. But I think he took it in a direction where he wanted it to be something good, masculinity to be something good. So that's why I don't think it's woke. Again, you want to make the argument of some of the other creators that have been, again, in stewardship of Conan since Robert E. Howard stopped writing his books. You can make some arguments, I think, for that. But again, you have to remember, Conan was not the character that Robert E. Howard actually wanted to create. You got to remember that if you're a Conan fan. The version that he wanted to write was Kull, who was a king, and it was tied to Atlantis and all this kind of stuff. He wanted to write Kull stories. But Conan, when, again, as a good writer, he started to tell different kinds of stories to throw as many out there as possible to see which one stuck. Conan was the one that stuck and the one that people wanted. And that's why he listened to his audience and started writing more and more Conan stories and then basically incorporated the Kull stories into Conan. But he wanted to write Kull stories. I think as a writer, and looking back not only at his history, but the stories themselves, I can say that positively. You might think that's just my opinion, and to some extent it is, I guess, but I would say that he wanted to write Kull stories, and that was a much different character. And to some extent, a much more grounded character in virtue, that is to say, in a way that he was a lawful good king at the beginning and throughout the stories that he wanted to tell. Whereas Conan was, I'm going to trace the history of a barbaric character who becomes a lawful good king. So anyway, scrolling down. Jules says, I'm just saying all Marvel characters are liberals except for Punisher, John Walker, and Julia Carpenter, Spider-Woman. Okay. And maybe Iron Man. I wouldn't even, I don't know. I think that's a metric that I couldn't even put to the characters right now. Some of them, especially after the decades and decades worth of stories of these characters handled by people. Let's see. Cleric says, Antifa. Yeah, I don't know if you meant to put equals weird kids. Is it Antifa is greater than weird kids who hate their parents is greater than, no, basically saying leads to, I'm thinking of this in mathematical terms. So Antifa leads to weird kids who hate their parents, which leads to go around the parents and claim grandpa's legacy to annoy the parents. Actually, I could see that. That kind of makes sense. Let's see. Jules says USSR became the enemy because the communists FDR was dead. Because the communists. Well, USSR existed because of communism. So not sure where you're going with that. Not arguing with it. I'm just not sure where you're going with it. Scrolling down. Rex is here. How you doing, Rex? Scrolling down. George says, I don't think Conan's ever been woke. I mean, a guy who eats, drinks, sleeps with women, and kills his enemies. Scrolling down. Faz says, I couldn't get Conan books because of Diamond's bankruptcy. Titan Comics weren't with the new distributor my comic book has until last week. I don't have a credit card, so I couldn't order them online. Okay. That's very interesting, Vaz. That actually puts a wrinkle on comic collecting, that modern comic collecting, that is very, very interesting. The destruction of Diamond might actually make it so that comics become less accessible. And I think the less accessibility of comics actually makes them more popular. Quite honestly. Anyway, it's good to know, Vaz. Thank you very much. Thank you for that information. Scrolling down. Jules says, Captain Marvel was a kid, So inherently patriotic. Bullet Man was ultra Chad against crime, patriot material. Blue Beetle might not be true, and I'm just a complete chill for Hawkman, so I say patriotic. Okay, good to know. I think that I am so far behind in this chat, it's going to take me another hour to actually get to the bottom of it, but I will get to the bottom of it before we leave this live stream. Let's see, scrolling down. Scrolling down. Let's see. See, normally when I get to the bottom of the chat, there's a lot more crosstalk anyways. Let's see. So I don't know if a lot of these questions or comments are for me at all. Let's see. Scrolling down. Yeah, Michael says Bernie has 3 mansions and a Lamborghini, so socialism has lifted him out of poverty. Yeah. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Michael Salsa says the Disney She-Hulk show made She-Hulk #1 lose like $400 in value. Really? I didn't think that that the She-Hulk #1. Are you talking about? Well, okay, you're talking about the actual She-Hulk #1, which was the first appearance of the character in its own series, not the John Byrne version. Okay, I never really pay much attention to the cost of books that I don't own. I never knew what the She-Hulk #1 was worth. Let's see. Scrolling down. George says the Japanese Spider-Man came out right after the American one was canceled because Spider-Man was really big in Japan. Well, yeah, it's a completely different character, though. Completely different character. Let's see. Scrolling down, Cleric says, my naive but got tricked by every other comic I saw being a collector's edition. Lucky I didn't buy too many. Yeah, that was the 90s in a nutshell. Let's see. Scrolling down. Clerics, I also love this comment. I love my potato, love my Pepsi, simple as. Yeah. Let's see. Scrolling down. Sequential Treasures is here in the comments. Says, RJ, wish I had known you were planning to do a live stream, talk about Cap, would have joined in. Yeah, I just wanted to do this for my first live stream back. I just wanted to talk to the chat because, again, I feel like I'm ignoring the chat, and I am so thankful for you guys being here every time I do a live stream. Scrolling down. Let's see if I can... Gen X says prequels were terrible. Yeah, I agree. Prequels were terrible. Cleric says, I'm glad the prequels gave us Pod Racer 64. That was a good game. Okay, there you go. It's like GoldenEye. Not many people remember GoldenEye for how great a movie it was. They remember GoldenEye because of the game that got spawned off of it. Scrolling down. Tony says, RJ, do you think that the underlying story of Bram Stoker's Dracula was a fear of foreign invasion? No. I think the underlying story of Dracula was the friendship of the people who are hunting Dracula. It's not about Dracula at all. It's mistitled. And most people, again, it's kind of like the idiotic Frankenstein stories where the story was about Dr. Frankenstein, and for some reason it's got morphed into it's about Frankenstein's monster, who we now call Frankenstein. The story of Dracula, again, going back to the Mary Shelley book, that was a story not about Dracula. I mean, he's a minor character. The character of Dracula is a minor character in the story. It is a story about the friendship of the people hunting down this monster. And how they come together and how they, in a virtuous way, even like Quincy gives up his life for this. And Quincy doesn't have that much skin in the game. Sure, with the death of Mina, he does have a emotional connection to the entire thing, and the other people are his friends. But that's the thing. The other people are his friends, and he dies for his friends and the fact that they want this monster dead for personal reasons, and he's along for the ride, and he does have some personal reasons in connection to the entire thing, but he's like, we're doing this for good and the good of our friendship. which actually develops for many of them along the way of hunting this monster. Anyways, scrolling down. Scrolling down. Let's see if I see any more. Again, there's a lot of crosstalk. John West is here. How you doing, John West? Nice to see you in the chat. Scrolling down. Sound Engraver says, I finished Batman Prey and Terror this week. I love the Batman Bruce Wayne hybrid. Okay. Scrolling down. Let's see. Ryan Banks says, RJ, in a world of villains with laser guns, machine guns, swords, grenades, etc., how does Captain America make sense when his only weapon is a shield with no built-in offensive technology and no gun? Well, the shield makes sense in the fact that for the longest time, it's always been a combination of adamantium and vibranium. So it's basically a magic shield that will absorb any impact whatsoever. And the fact that he can throw it with the round shield anyways, it makes it an offensive weapon. But again, that's part of the beauty of characters within comic books, if you ask me, because these characters should stick to their normal, let's say, their normal rogues gallery, because their normal rogues gallery only goes so far as their capacity to defeat them. That's why those stories are told. You're not going to have somebody like Captain America going and fighting, let's say, someone with the Sentry level power level. It just doesn't make any sense, right? But yeah, even ray guns bounce off the magic shield, right? And again, with the whole, I think that again, the whole fact that it's basically a magic shield is good enough. Let's say MacGuffin in the entire thing to make it make sense. Tony says, RJ, why do you think that Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft books are semi-popular with leftists, yet they can't stand Howard or his views? I wouldn't say that Howard is popular with leftists. I don't think that. I could be wrong, but I don't really have evidence of that. Now, the Lovecraft stuff, it's because it's all nihilistic, and that's what the left is. It's nihilism. So yeah, Lovecraft and his whole cosmic horror is just nihilism. So that's why those books and stories would have much more of a connection to the left. John West says, when learning about virtue, what are a couple of books you recommend? I'm getting some reading material together. Quite honestly, depends on where you are and what you actually want to get out of reading virtue. If you just want general philosophy statements about virtue, you can go read some of the better dialogues of Plato, some of the more virtue connected books of Aristotle. But if you want modern books and one that, if you don't mind a religious bent to it, there is now a good translation of Yusuf Pieper's The Four Cardinal Virtues. For the longest time, you could only get it in German. It's basically a collection of his lectures on virtues, and it's a spectacular book. If you don't mind, again, very much a religious take on the entire thing, a Christian religious take, to say the least. And again, he is someone who had to flee Germany. I think it was before World War II started. He had to flee Germany because he was someone who saw true evil and didn't want any part of it. Let's see. Scrolling down. For some reason, I can scroll down, but I can't scroll back up. Oh, there we go. I can only scroll up in a very haphazard way. Let's see. I got to scroll up, and it is extremely difficult to do for some reason. Cleric says, leftists love madness and chaos. Agreed. That's why they love Nietzsche as well. The whole idea of dynamistic destruction and creation. It's a Nietzschean idea. Tony says, RJ, I heard a reviewer once say that Robert E. Howard had an Oedipus complex. Would you agree? I would say I would not discount that possibility. I don't know any more than that. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jewel thinks that DC has all of the right-wing characters. Again, and DC is greater than Marvel. Yeah. I would not argue with that point, Jewel, but it is something worth, if I wanted to argue about it, it would be of a spectacular topic. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Cleric says, someone asked about Conan again. Want me to go off on another tangent to you? Let's see. Vaz says, the American company that bought most of Diamond also doesn't deliver to Canada. Really? Okay. I did not know that. I'm not up on any of these things. I have let's just say, I'll just come out and say it. I'm not watching Richard Meyer and his channel anymore because he's gone insane. And it was because I had watched so many of his videos that YouTube would give me recommendations of other comic videos, which is how I basically kept in the loop about so much of this comic stuff. So I'm kind of out of the loop. I should watch more critical thinking and things like that, but they just never pop up in my feed, and I never think to search it individually. Scrolling down. Jewel is correct. Need to start up a bootleg ring, get comics to Canada. Let's see. Cleric says, yeah, I barely watched a second of Bond before or after playing GoldenEye. Yeah, scrolling down. Let's see. It's going down. Ryan says, RJ, for the record, I love what Captain America stands for, but I believe every hero needs a great offensive weapon. An awesome sword, crossbow, or laser gun would make him more dynamic. Well, he originally did have a gun. So, yeah. I don't know if you could actually redo the character to have a gun in this day and age. But if you had a ray gun, maybe. Someone should do a version of the character that's much more in line with that. I agree. It might be a much more better reintroduction of the character if they're ever to do him correctly again. Let's put it that way. So yeah, John agrees with me. He says, Captain America had a gun in the first Avenger. Not sure about the books. Scrolling down. Solaris says, how you doing, Solaris? Shield is better for propaganda. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Tony says, I always loved the fact that Captain America's weapon was strictly a defensive and not offensive weapon. Again, I would say the way he can throw that shield and the amount of power he can put behind it makes it an offensive weapon. Let's see. Scrolling down. Jewel says, Richard Meyer, a good example of a lefty veteran. That's great. Let's see. Scrolling down. Soundographer says, get off the stream, RJ. You'll never finish the chat. I might have to. Depends on who walks through my door. It's getting kind of late. Let's see. Scrolling down. John West says, have you read the issue of Islander magazine from Carl Benjamin? I have not. I have seen it, but I have not got to read it. Scrolling down. Let's see. Scrolling down. Let's see. Tony, I'm not sure if this is for me, but let's read it. The booktuber community, the YouTube book review channel, love Lovecraft and Howard, but they always prefer reviews saying they were horrible racists. Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about there you go. Someone put me in a tangent again. Let's talk about Howard and racism for a second. Howard is writing his books under the impression of basically Darwin becoming mainstream, and that's the time that he is writing in America, where Darwin has just become something that mainstream, let's just say, culture was disseminating to people of Howard's level of education. And so he's looking at these ideas of of what? Of evolution. And he's saying, okay, how do these work in a way that I can make sense of them in a narrative style? So some of the points of what Howard's world actually looks like for Conan is the fact that people can degrade very much into barbarism extremely quickly, and not just into barbarism, but backwards into animalistic nature so much that they can literally start to become animals again and become monkeys and apes again. This is part and parcel of the entire world of Robert E. Howard. And it's not just monkeys. Well, I suppose like basically the Yeti or the Abominable Snowman kind of characters that he writes as well. They're kind of monkey-ish, I guess, and have always been. But yeah, there is, I think, a duality of animalistic nature that comes out within Robert E. Howard's storylines. They are monkeys and snakes. Snakes represent evil. Monkeys represent, at the very least, the possibility of a humanity that can become better. And again, it's being written under the backdrop of, oh, I just discovered these ideas of evolution. So, yeah, I can see very much why anybody who is writing or reviewing from a modern standpoint would see Howard as a horrible racist. But at the same time, looking at the material that he had and the place that he's writing from, I'm not sure horrible racist is the actual moniker that I would put on him. I would simply say he's a product of his time. And I wouldn't put trigger warnings on that at all, like normal people are. This is a product of its time. Here's a trigger warning for you. No, I'm sorry. It's a part of our history, and it's one that you have to take in historical context, and you can write better stories based upon those limitations, if you ask me. But anyway, that's my take on the entire thing. Scrolling down. Oh, I think I've got to the bottom of the chat. Look at that. But someone has given me another super chat. Thank you very much. 9055 says, I am a recent viewer of your videos, and they are great. A man who cares about truth and valuable and more are needed. Truth and value. Well, yeah, my entire channel is centered around virtue. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the super chat. Whenever people's handles run together, my brain does not work correctly. The way I learned to read, I'll just say this right now. The way I learned to read was through memorization. So that if you take things, and even if there are two words and you smash them together, my brain just goes, it's like it's starting to spark and it's about to short circuit whenever I see people's handles that are several words put together. So I apologize. I'll just call you 9055. Anyways, scrolling down to the bottom of the chat. Let's see. Clerics also says, lefties love Lovecraft, kinda linked to considering themselves inherently racist, yet being one of the good ones. They get attached to the past to redeem it and consume it and convert it. That is an excellent point, Clerics. Excellent point. It is their attempt to redefine the past, to rewrite the past. You are correct on that. Absolutely. That is something I could do an entire video about. Scrolling down. I thought I was getting to the bottom of the chat. Maybe not. Tony says, as my father, who was an English teacher, used to say, never judge the past with the morals and standards of the present. There you go. Scrolling down. I have gotten to the end of the chat. And Clerics, I'll give you the final word. Thank you very much for that comment, by the way. So thank you to everyone who has been here and shown up for this chat. I think we got close to 30 people in the chat at one time, and usually I get about a couple of hundred people that watch this stream afterwards. So thank you very much, everyone, for showing up and listening to me ramble about Captain America. I apologize for those people who were in the second stream. I will make sure that we only have one stream going next time, and don't have to deal with this whole aspect ratio thing. Although I will try to stream on more than one platform next time as well. I think I'll try to add Rumble if it is even possible. So thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. I will, again, not entirely sure what my timeline looks with streaming with John again. We're going to try to stream a little bit more if at all possible, but that will either mean waiting a long time to stream together or doing it probably very late at night, one or the other. And that affects whether or not I'm going to be streaming and how I'm going to be streaming on my normal channel. But I will try to be here again next Wednesday. I want to get back into the swing of things, and it all depends on what my schedule looks like. Things are getting out of hand with my schedule. Anyways, thank you very much, everyone, for showing up. I'm glad that you're here for the whole hour and 40 minutes that we've been talking, or I've been talking. And I will just leave you. Well, I don't even think I'll play my trailer again. We've been here for an hour and 40 minutes. We watched the Fade to Blue trailer at the beginning. Anyone who wants to go back and see that trailer, it's at the beginning. That's the book that I'm working on right now. Anyways, thank you very much, everyone. And I will see you all again next week.